The wind howled across the empty plains, carrying dust, memories, and the faint cry of two restless babies. Inside a small wooden cabin, Daniel Briggs, once the toughest cowboy in Dakota, paced the creaking floorboards, his worn boots echoing against the silence. His hat lay forgotten on the table beside two empty milk bottles and a pile of baby clothes he couldn't figure out how to fold. Just a year ago, Daniel had been breaking wild horses, living free and fearless. But life had its own way of humbling even the strongest men. When his wife Mary passed during childbirth, Daniel's world collapsed into stillness. He was left with twin girls, tiny, fragile reminders of love and loss, and no idea how to raise them. The townsfolk whispered, calling him a fool for trying to do it alone. They said a cowboy couldn't care for babies, that a man like him should find someone else or send them away. But Daniel was stubborn, like the land itself. "They're my girls," he'd say, voice rough as gravel. "I'll raise 'em right." Yet as the days stretched into weeks, loneliness crept in. He burned meals, botched diapers, and barely slept. The twins cried through the nights, and every cry cut through him like a knife. He'd sit by the fire, rocking them awkwardly, whispering stories about their mother, about how she used to sing to the stars. But even his deep, gentle voice couldn't soothe them. One morning, as the frost still clung to the windows, a knock came at the door. Daniel froze. No one ever came this far out. He opened the door and found a young woman standing there, her face flushed from the cold, a loaf of warm bread in her hands. "You look like a man who hasn't eaten in days," she said softly. Her name was Clara Mayfield, a widow from the nearby town. She'd heard about the cowboy trying to raise two babies alone, and her heart couldn't rest knowing someone was struggling like that. Daniel blinked, unsure what to say. "I don't need charity," he muttered. Clara smiled kindly. "It's not charity, Mr. Briggs. It's bread." She stepped past him, set the loaf on the table, and before he could protest, she picked up one of the twins. The crying stopped almost instantly. Daniel just stood there, hat in hand, stunned. "How'd you do that?" he asked quietly. "Women just know," she said with a wink. Over the next few days, Clara visited again, first with soup, then with a blanket she'd sewn for the girls. She moved around the cabin like sunlight slipping through dusty windows, quiet but warm, bringing life back into a place that had forgotten how to breathe. The baby smiled more, cried less. Daniel started eating properly, sleeping a little. And though he never said it out loud, he began to look forward to those gentle knocks on the door. But as her visits grew more frequent, so did the whispers in town. "She's got no shame," they said. "Widow Mayfield's found herself another man." Clara ignored them, but Daniel could see the weight it placed on her shoulders. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the girls slept peacefully, Daniel looked at Clara sitting by the fire, mending one of the baby's dresses. "You don't have to keep coming, you know," he said softly. "Folks talk too much." Clara didn't look up. "Let them talk," she replied. "You can't raise them alone, Daniel." "No one can." For a moment, silence filled the cabin, heavy and honest. Daniel looked at the twins sleeping near the fire, then back at Clara. Something inside him shifted. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to face this storm alone. The days rolled into weeks, and winter began to loosen its grip on the plains. The snow melted into soft earth, and for the first time in months, laughter echoed through Daniel Briggs' cabin, a sound he thought he'd never hear again. The twins had grown stronger, their giggles filling the mornings as Clara moved about the kitchen, baking bread or humming gentle tunes. Daniel often found himself standing by the doorway, watching quietly, his heart thawing a little more each day. The woman who had come with bread had unknowingly brought back warmth, purpose, and life to a man who'd been living like a ghost. One crisp morning, as the sun climbed over the horizon, Clara stepped outside to hang the laundry while Daniel tried feeding the twins. The scene was a mix of chaos and comedy, Daniel holding one baby in his arm, another on his knee, a bottle in each hand, both crying louder than thunder. Clara turned and couldn't help laughing, the sound pure and joyful. Daniel tried to look annoyed but failed miserably. "They've got your stubbornness," she teased. "Mine," he said, pretending to be offended. "You're the one who taught them that noise gets attention." They both laughed, and in that small, tender moment, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. Still, Daniel fought the feeling growing inside him. He'd lost too much before, He feared that loving again would only lead to more pain. That evening, as the twins slept, he stepped outside and stared at the stars. Clara joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "They say when someone leaves us, they send someone else to guide us through the dark," she said softly. Daniel's voice broke slightly. "You think Mary sent you?" Clara looked at him with gentle eyes. "Maybe she just wanted you to remember how to live." The days that followed brought new strength. Daniel began to laugh again, to tell stories, to teach Clara how to ride horses and shoot straight. In return, she taught him patience, tenderness, and how to bake bread without burning the cabin down. Together they rebuilt not just a home, but a life. The twins grew happier, recognizing Clara's voice as quickly as their father's. The cabin that once echoed with silence now sang with life, crackling fires, soft lullabies, and shared dreams. But as with every story in the Old West, peace didn't come easy. One afternoon, a group of ranchers stopped by. They smirked at Daniel. "Heard the widow's been keeping you company," one said mockingly. "Didn't take long for you to move on." Daniel's jaw tightened, his fists clenched. Before he could speak, Clara stepped forward. "If kindness is a sin, then I'll bear it proudly," she said, voice firm as steel. The men chuckled uneasily and rode off, realizing neither Daniel nor Clara were people to be trifled with. Later, Daniel turned to her. "You didn't have to stand up for me," he said quietly. Clara smiled. "You stood up for me when you opened that door. I'm just returning the favor." He looked at her for a long moment, the firelight flickering across her face, and in that moment, he knew home wasn't walls or land. Home was people who refused to give up on you. Spring arrived, painting the prairie in wildflowers. One evening, Daniel sat on the porch, the twins asleep inside and Clara beside him. The sky burned orange and gold. "I was lost," he said softly, "and you found me." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "No, Daniel. We found each other." He took her hand, rough and warm, and whispered, "Stay." She smiled faintly. "Only if there's bread left to bake." They both laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world was finally right. The wind carried their laughter across the plains, the sound of healing, of second chances, of two broken souls learning that love can rise even from ashes. And as the stars began to shimmer, the screen fades and the narrator's voice softly says, "If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Old West Legends, where every story reminds you that even in the toughest times, love always finds a way."